ranking albums named the best.
VAST is a spectacular album. It's particularly remarkable for John's youth and adeptness relative to that. Sure, I've heard other really good things by really young people, but from a production standpoint, none sound this good in total sonically. And it's got a nice, unique approach. It's got dark, industrial-esque rock combined with samples of Bulgarian choir and chanting and a chain gang. The youth does show through in the angst and a bit of misogyny to the songs, but if you can stomach that, this is a singular masterpiece of the 90s. If you start off with the first album that sounds so much like it should be a second album, then the actual second album skips to what's usually the third, the label-mandated pivot to pop. This more digestible version of Vast is a reduction. They were meant to be a band with multiple band members now. I don't know if it would have been good to have another that was just like the debut, like a visual audio sensory amphitheater. I'm in favor of giving a pop version of Your Sound a go, and what he comes out with here is cute, but it can obviously never stack up. Now, it's already getting untidy because the next album is the label-approved version of his prior two albums. John's unmastered version of the two albums has been released by itself, but really, nearly every good track is on here. His songwriting never maintained the wildness of that first album, and in this era it's hit or miss, but they picked nearly all of the hits to put on this disc. Dead Angels is the main casualty from this set, though that might have been recorded later. That whittles it down to an album that's somewhere between the first two. The songwriting has the more artificial structure of the second album, but sonically it's closer to the first one, maybe a bit more baroque. The physical release of TNC is actually mastered fine and sometimes distinguishably, so just consider that an alternative purchase to Nude if you want a couple more good tracks and a couple bad ones. I'm representing the project with Nude anyway. Nude is ultimately a solid product that's gonna go in between. I don't know if Vast is ever going to recapture how great this debut is, but they don't really need to because we can just listen to this. From now on, it gets really messy. Vast really struggled against the requirements of the label and the music industry, and to keep up with his work took a lot of devotion, but here's a summary. I'm keeping it to the actual Vast albums and one EP for good reason. John has a very transparent approach to publishing stuff online, so much stuff online, which unfortunately means you get to see what he's like as a person too. Of all this extra content, there's a lot of demos, recompilations, reimaginations, and excuses that don't aspire to be rankable albums. Publishing this much on the internet doesn't mean people have to sit through it. Please subscribe. One that's worth mention is A Complete Demonstration, which has had a limited physical release. Being a demos compilation, it's inconsistent in song quality, uniqueness, and recording quality, but with a career that later dipped so hard, take what you can get. It's comforting to dig out the few unique 90s songs on here and hear more of his songwriting when it was on form, though it's more goofy and electro. April brought a reinvention, but not a good one. Going acoustic can work if you've got anything interesting to offer, or it can just put the plain in plaintive. The songs are bare and bleak and boring. Not really offensive, just dull. Potentially offensive in suggesting you might enjoy them. Gothy moments offer a bit of promise, then it just slouches back to tedium. There's two confusingly distinct track lists for this, and the one with everything passing by on is the one that has a good song on. Me and You is meant to be April with a pulse, but it doesn't even commit to that, and it's more of the pointless same. There was a problem at the time of the album's not hosting much new content if you kept up with his other releases under his own name, and that's basically true for everything after Music for People, but that's not really material to this ranking. Now that drab conversational song titles betray their low creativity, initially issued as a project titled with amazing self-awareness as Generica, and they now lack the sonic context that could have vindicated their insular superciliousness.
He still has such a silky voice, but no idea what to do with it. Songs about women he's met just make you feel sorry for women he's met. Though there's a better sound feel than April, there's not even a novelty justification for this product, and that's making me call it the poorest.
Here's a surprise, I'm back on camera because there was a surprise EP under an alias. It's apparently the fictional band from his novel. I'm not even sure if his novel was released. But what matters is that he consciously chose to restore the old school Vast style. Not quite this level of old school, but this level of old school.
I've warped time a little here on releases, but I'm trying to match the songwriting chronology.
These songs specifically sound like they could fit in the nude era. One fresh element to it is a nice electronic crunch, and maybe it's intentional from writing in character, but by now his robotic approach to songwriting belies a shallowness to the singer. The way he whispers sweet nothings in a very standard form of songwriting, they come across as nothings. That's intentional. That's a good way to confront an old sound that you no longer have the soul to deliver on. Make a version that's so damn soulless. I just noticed a funny typo on the back.
It's sad but evident that it takes dishonesty for Vast to make good music at this point, to avoid his unpleasant sincerity.
Honestly, despite its brevity, the way that every song on here works puts it above nude for me. But that's just the ones I have on disc. Let's get back to trying to make sense of the rest of it.
And now years and decades are passing, and John's in the nasty loop of promising a return to form new album to fans, crowdfunding, ranting about feminists, releasing openly unfinished work, and going quiet again. It's not even worth keeping up with if you can ignore bigotry and just like fully formed music, because there isn't that anymore. See, Mean is a compilation of unfinished tracks for the never upcoming album he got fans to pay for years ago. And there's some promise in this, but a lot of tedium, and fan loyalty at this point is really unjustifiable. Little flickers of what he's good at seem placed to tease or troll the fans. Or maybe it's just not that accessible outside of teenage angst, when his kind of outlook was cute. These are delivered as demos with lazy vocals and cheap drum tracks, but there's not much that makes you want to hear the finished version, which he's apparently given up on. The overall songwriting doesn't reach very far, and it takes a skip button and a strong imagination to consider this a good set. If the next studio album is ever gonna happen, it's looking like it's at this middling level. We've heard some tracks in single releases, and if we try and take them seriously, the electro vibes that resemble his earliest demos are real tasty, like She Is Murder, but that doesn't mean they're not kinda incomplete songs, like She Is Murder. The duller habits of the rest of his career are equally present in these recent-ish releases. They're described as EPs, but at 3 songs each, I call them singles. It's not really that he's failed to recapture the deep and symphonic aesthetic of his debut, because he's never much tried to. The lonely boy aesthetic is now a lonely man who, at best, might have compelling misanthropic nuggets to offer, and at worst, boring misanthropic nuggets. So after all that, there's just 5 albums that aren't duplicates or demos or remakes, and they go like this.
Vast is a great idea that was delivered brilliantly once and quite well a few more times. Some things released under the name have been much less rewarding, but now I've told you which ones, you can hear some really good Vast.